Rome's power didn't begin with its legions. It began with the weapons in their hands. Battles opened with a deadly volley of pila, spears engineered not just to hit, but to cripple shields and break formations in seconds. Before the chaos settled, a wall of curved scutum shields slammed forward, a moving fortress that crushed space, momentum, and morale. And in that tight pressure, the gladius took over, short, fast, and brutally efficient, ending fights with precise, lethal thrusts. This wasn't random equipment. It was a perfectly designed system that turned ordinary soldiers into an unstoppable machine. This is the arsenal that built Rome and changed the course of history. Before swords clashed, before the brutal, up-close reality of hand-to-hand combat, came the whistle of death from above. For many of Rome's enemies, their first taste of Roman fury was the pilum, one of the most brilliant tactical weapons ever used by an ancient army. The pilum was way more than just a throwing spear. It was a clever piece of engineering designed not just to kill, but to completely strip an enemy of their defense. Typically around 2 meters long, about 7 feet, and weighing between 2 and 5 kilograms. The pilum was made of 2 parts. It had a long, thin iron shank with a hard, pyramid-shaped point, which was attached to a thick wooden shaft that gave it throwing weight. But the real genius was in that iron shank. The tip was hardened to punch through shields and armor, but the shank itself was often left soft or attached with a wooden pin designed to break. This wasn't a flaw, it was a tactical masterstroke. Roman legionaries were trained to unleash a huge coordinated volley of these spears from about 15 to 30 meters away. Right before they charged, the pilum's weight and momentum, focused on that tiny point, could punch right through an enemy's shield and wound the man hiding behind it. But even if it didn't kill anyone, its main job was often done. As soon as it hit a shield, the soft iron shank would bend under the impact. This simple bend made the spear useless to the enemy. They couldn't just pull it out and throw it back. More importantly, it turned the enemy's own shield into a clumsy, heavy mess. Imagine trying to fight in a tight formation with a 2-meter spear awkwardly dangling from your shield. The enemy soldier had a terrible choice: either ditch his main defense and face the Roman charge unprotected, or try to fight while being dragged down by a heavy piece of bent metal. This was especially devastating against armies like the Gauls, who relied on big shields and didn't wear much body armor. During the Republic, a legionary might carry 2 pila, a heavy and a lighter one. Later on, the Marian reforms standardized equipment, and by the start of the empire, most legionaries were armed with this shield-breaking terror. Think about the psychological impact. You're standing in a battle line, heart pounding, watching the silent, disciplined Roman legions march closer. Suddenly, the sky darkens as thousands of these heavy javelins fly toward you. The air fills with the sound of them thudding into shields and men. Your formation is instantly thrown into chaos. Shields are dropped, your friends are wounded, and your line is a mess. Just moments before a wall of Roman shields and stabbing swords crashes into you. The pilum wasn't just a weapon. It was an opening argument that broke the enemy's spirit and set the stage for the slaughter to come. If the pilum started the fight, the gladius finished it. No weapon is more famous in the Roman arsenal than this short, brutally efficient sword. For centuries, the image of a legionary, shielded by his scutum and methodically stabbing with his gladius, was the very picture of Roman power to our eyes, or even to their enemies who loved long, slashing swords. The gladius might have seemed unimpressive. At only about 40 to 60 centimeters long, it looked almost tiny, but it was a weapon designed not for flashy duels, but for efficient killing in the tight, crushing chaos of a melee. Interestingly, the gladius wasn't even a Roman invention. The Romans, ever the pragmatists, actually adopted the design from their enemies in Spain during the Punic Wars. After seeing how effective it was, they saw its potential, perfected it, and made it their own. Roman blacksmiths often used sophisticated techniques, with harder steel for the cutting edges and a softer, more flexible core. This made the sword both strong and resilient, so it was less likely to break in battle. The classic gladius was double-edged with a long, sharp point, so it could slash, but it was designed and used for one thing above all else. Thrusting Roman tacticians knew a basic truth of mass combat. Big, wild swings with a long sword waste energy and leave a fighter dangerously open. A slash looks scary, but it can be blocked by a shield or bounce off armor. A stab, though, is quick, takes very little movement, and is instantly lethal when aimed at the torso or face. The gladius was the perfect tool for that job. The Roman way of war was built around formation fighting. Legionaries advanced shoulder to shoulder, their large scutum shields overlapping to create an almost unbreakable wall. In the crush of bodies that followed a charge, there was just no room to swing a long sword or a heavy axe. But a legionary, tucked safely behind his shield, only needed a few inches to work. He could shove an enemy with his shield boss, then, with a quick, short motion, thrust the gladius from behind its cover. A stab to the gut, the ribs, the throat. It was a brutally efficient and low-energy way to kill. When thousands of soldiers did this in unison, stepping over the fallen, the battlefield became a machine of methodical slaughter. The sword evolved over the centuries, from the leaf-shaped Mainz type to the later straight-edged Pompey type. Legionaries wore the gladius high on their right hip, which allowed for a smooth draw that didn't get tangled up with the large shield held in their left hand. This whole system, pilum, scutum, gladius, was a triumvirate of death. The pilum broke the enemy's defense, the scutum acted as a mobile fortress, and the gladius delivered the fatal blow in the close-quarters chaos that the Romans didn't just expect, but actively created. It wasn't the longest or prettiest sword on the battlefield, but in the hands of a disciplined legionary, it was without a doubt the deadliest. A Roman soldier's greatest weapon might not have been his sword. It might have been the shield that protected him, the scutum. This iconic piece of gear was more than just defense. It was the foundation of the entire Roman tactical system, a mobile wall that was both a fortress and a weapon. Without the scutum, the deadly gladius would have been useless, and the legion would have been just another army with it. They were nearly unstoppable. The classic imperial scutum was a large, rectangular, curved shield. Standing about 4 feet tall and 2.5 feet wide, its curved shape was brilliant for deflecting blows and letting things like arrows and sling stones glance off. And it wasn't just a simple plank of wood. The scutum was a masterpiece of composite construction, built from 3 layers of thin wood strips glued together, with the grain of each layer at a right angle to the next, just like modern plywood. This made it incredibly strong, but surprisingly light for its size. The front was covered with canvas and leather, and the edges were bound in metal to stop them from splitting. At its center was a big, rounded iron boss called an umbo. The umbo did 2 things. First, it deflected powerful, direct hits away from the soldier's hand, which gripped a bar behind it. Second, it was a weapon. In the tight press of a battle, a legionary could punch forward with his shield, using the heavy iron boss to stagger an opponent, create an opening, or even smash their face before landing a quick stab with the gladius. The scutum's size and shape gave a legionary almost total body protection, from shoulders to shins. When soldiers locked their shields together, they created a solid barrier that was incredibly hard for an enemy to break through. This formation gave the Romans immense confidence in close combat. The historian Polybius noted that the sheer size of their shields allowed Roman soldiers to press forward, literally leaning their weight into the enemy line while safely stabbing from behind their mobile cover. But the most famous use of the scutum was the testudo, or tortoise formation. This was a special formation, mostly used during sieges or when advancing under heavy arrow fire. The legionaries would pack into a super tight block. The men in front held their shields vertically, while the ranks behind held their shields flat over their heads. The soldiers on the sides held their shields facing outwards, creating a completely armored box that was almost immune to missiles rained down from fortress walls. The historian Cassius Dio even claimed the formation was so strong you could drive a chariot over it. It took incredible discipline to pull off, with shields overlapping like roof tiles, but it turned a unit of soldiers into a human tank. It was the ultimate expression of the Roman way of war: collective discipline and superior equipment beating individual heroics. While the pilum, gladius, and scutum were the core of a legionary's gear, the Roman soldier was basically a walking arsenal. He had extra layers of weapons and armor that made him a tough and versatile fighter. Tucked into his belt, usually on the opposite side of his gladius, was the pugio, the Roman military dagger. The pugio was a legionary's last-ditch weapon. If he lost his gladius or was trapped in a grapple too close even for a short sword, the pugio was his final answer. But it was also an essential utility tool. In the daily life of a soldier, it was used for everything from cutting food and repairing equipment to digging. This dual-purpose nature made it a critical part of a soldier's kit, a practical tool for camp life, and a deadly weapon when needed. Of course, protection was key. The classic image of a Roman soldier usually includes the lorica segmentata, the iconic armor made of overlapping iron plates held together by leather straps, introduced in the early empire. This armor was top-of-the-line military tech, offering great protection at a lighter weight than the older chainmail. But before and even alongside it was the lorica hamata, chainmail. The Romans adopted it from the Celts, and it was a flexible, effective armor that stayed in use for centuries, especially with non-citizen auxiliary troops. It was heavier than the segmentata, but easier to maintain, which was a huge plus on long campaigns. On his head, the legionary wore his helmet, or galea. These also changed over time, from the simpler styles of the Republic to the more elaborate imperial designs. They were masterpieces of defensive engineering, with wide neck guards to protect from downward sword strokes, and hinged cheek pieces to protect the face without blocking vision or hearing. The helmet wasn't just designed to stop a blow, but to deflect its energy, keeping a soldier in the fight. Together, the helmet and body armor, combined with the scutum, made the Roman legionary an incredibly tough nut to crack. Every piece of his gear, from his hobnailed sandals to his dagger, was part of a system designed for one thing: survival and victory. The Roman army's power wasn't just about its infantry. When faced with a walled city or a huge enemy army, Rome brought its engineers to the front, deploying terrifying artillery that could shatter walls and break enemy formations from a distance. These were the heavy hitters, the machines that showed off Rome's mastery of mechanical warfare. The most versatile of these was the ballista, essentially a giant crossbow. The ballista was a marvel of torsion engineering. It used two arms, each set in a twisted bundle of animal sinew, which acted like massive springs. When the arms were winched back, they stored enormous energy. When released, they could hurl heavy, iron-tipped bolts or large stones over incredible distances. The ballista was a weapon of both power and precision. Bigger versions were used in sieges to batter walls, while smaller, more mobile versions could be used on the battlefield. A A smaller, more specialized version was the Scorpio, or Scorpion, and it was just as deadly as its name suggests. The Scorpio was a smaller catapult that fired large armor-piercing bolts. It was the sniper rifle of the ancient world. The writer Vegetius said that each legion had about 55 of these machines, which could be used to pick off enemy officers or silence enemy archers from up to 400 meters away. During his siege of Avaricum, Julius Caesar described how a single Scorpio relentlessly cut down Gallic defenders one by one as they tried to put out fires on their walls. Some were even mounted on carts, called carroballistae, creating mobile artillery that could keep up with the legions and provide covering fire. But for sheer, raw, destructive power, few weapons could match the onager, named after the wild ass for its violent kick when it fired. The onager was Rome's heavy catapult, a true wall breaker. It had a simpler but more powerful design. One massive vertical arm held under tension by twisted sinew. When released, the arm flew forward and smashed into a frame, whipping a sling at its tip that could launch huge stones, some weighing 25 kilograms or more, in a high arc. The onager wasn't a precision weapon, it was an instrument of terror. Its purpose was to smash, batter, and break the enemy's will. Fired in batteries during a siege, onagers could reduce stone walls to rubble and crush buildings inside a city. Often, the psychological impact of seeing death rain from the sky was enough to make a city surrender. These engines proved that Rome's dominance came not just from the strength of its soldiers, but from the genius of its engineers. The arsenal of the Roman soldier was a perfectly tuned system where every weapon had a vital role. It started with the long-range terror of the siege engines, breaking down walls and morale. It continued with the opening volley of the pilum, a shower of spears designed to disarm and disorder the enemy right before impact. Then came the advance of the scutum, an impenetrable, mobile wall that let the legionaries close the distance safely. And finally, in the brutal, close-quarters fighting the Romans perfected, came the deadly thrust of the gladius, the final instrument of conquest. No single weapon did it all. The gladius was just a short sword without the scutum's protection. The scutum was less effective without the tight discipline of the formation, and the formation itself was vulnerable without the chaos created by the pilum. It was the combination of all these things, weapons, training, discipline, and engineering, that made the Roman military machine nearly unstoppable for 500 years. This was an arsenal that didn't just win battles. It built an empire that shaped the course of Western civilization. What do you think was the most innovative Roman weapon? Was it the bending pilum, the deadly gladius, or the human tank formation of the testudo? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this look at the tools of ancient warfare, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories that uncover the secrets of history's greatest armies. Thanks for watching.